What is happiness? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is the podcast arm of Viri Christi. Viri Christi is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help young men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at virichristi.com. This is the Intro to Moral Theology, Episode 9. All right, fellas, we are into month 3 of this introduction to moral theology. Remember, month 1, we did some, preliminary considerations. What is ethics, and what's the difference between ethics and moral theology, and what kind of sources do we have access to, and stuff like that. Last month, I introduced you guys to the first of the 2 most important questions that have to be answered in Catholic moral theology. The first is, what is a human? So last week we talked about what a human being is, that we have a soul and a body. We have different powers and appetites that come with that. We talked a little bit about what the situation was like for Adam and Eve in the garden, and then kind of what our problem is with original sin. This month, we're going to turn our attention to the second most important question, or foundational question that must be answered to understand morality, and that is, what is the moral life all about? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the end or the goal of ethics or moral philosophy or moral theology this month. Okay, and the way we're going to do it. Today, we're just going to talk about what happiness is, and I'm going to argue that the desire that happiness is the point of the moral life. That's this week. The question we're going to leave off with at the end of this week is, what object, if we're made to be happy, what object can make us happy? In the next 2 weeks, we'll look at 4 non-Christian approaches to happiness. Those are called hedonism and utilitarianism. We'll look at next week. And what's called stoicism and evolutionism. We'll cover that in week 3. Once we show why these non-Christian approaches are faulty, okay, we're going to turn to the Christian answer to what is the happy life. And I'm going to argue that the happy life is being in union with God in heaven in something called the Beatific vision. Okay, so that's a plan of attack. But today, let's just talk about what the happy life is. First thing, what you guys got to keep in mind about Catholic morality is that Catholic morality is goal-centered, okay? It is utterly, utterly important, okay? In fact, it is a foundation of morality that we have to think about where we're going before we get started, okay? Thomas Aquinas' ethics is ordered towards human fulfillment. And we're going to argue human happiness. I'm going to argue, Thomas argues this, and Jesus and the whole church tradition, is that when God made us, he made us with a goal in mind. And that goal was subjectively for us to be happy. And then objectively, the only thing that can make us perfectly happy is to be with him in heaven for all eternity. Okay? And so I want to unpack this idea a little bit with you guys so you can kind of have a firm grip on what is kind of this main thrust of what Catholic morality is all about. Okay. Let's use what we talked about last week to launch into this. Human beings are endowed with an intellect and a will. Okay, so we have an intellect that can think, and we have a will that can make choices. Okay, and then we have those lower appetites as well. Okay, guys, we are attracted to goals because we think that they're good for us. Okay, so when we talk about an end or a goal and things like that, what I mean is there's certain things we want, and if you ask yourself, why do I want them? It's because we think they're good. So if I tell you guys, I want a cheeseburger right now, you say, well, why do you want that? I can say, well, because cheeseburgers are good. What I mean by that is they're desirable. They're desirable because they're tasty, because they can satiate my appetite, because they might help with my health or help me get a workout later. But guys, we ascertain goals that we want because we think they're good for us, whether that's graduating from high school, playing sports, whatever. Okay. So we are creatures that are always aimed at things that we think are good for us. Now, important little side note I'm going to unpack later. Just because you think something's good for you doesn't mean it actually is. So we can be mistaken about this stuff, okay? But the kind of the fundamental idea I want you guys to get in your heads and start reflect upon is I do aim towards things I think are good. That's why I do them. So anything you do because you think is good for you in some way, okay? Now, you might be wrong about that thing, but you do it because you think it's good for you. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, with all that consideration in place, what then does it mean to be happy? So we got to wrap our minds around what happiness is. Happiness is when you desire something because you think it's good, and then you actually possess it. So happiness is what we call when we possess something that we desired beforehand. That's what it means to be happy. So you're not happy when you want to win the state title. You're happy when you actually win it. You're not happy thinking about taking a girl to prom. You're happy when she actually says yes. You're not happy thinking about the lunch period that's coming up later today. You're happy when you're actually eating it. Okay. So happiness is when you have some sort of desire for some goal or end, and then you actually get it. Okay. Now notice that experience of wanting something and getting it. We have that experience a lot. We have that experience for food and maybe a cute girl you want to take to prom or winning state titles or getting an A on a test or whatever. Okay. But notice that the things in this life that make us happy are always imperfect because the happiness that comes with those things in this life is fleeting. So when you get an A on the test, you're happy, you're satisfied, it's all good. But then the next day you go back to school and you got to start over again. When you win a baseball game, you're happy. It's like the 24-hour rule in sports, right? You'd be happy for 24 hours. Then you got to get back to it and keep plugging away because you got another game to win. Things in this world do not perfectly satisfy us because the goods in this world, though they're good, are imperfectly good or they're finite goods. Okay, does that make sense? Because a finite good can't make you perfectly happy. Here's the rub, though. We want to be perfectly happy. Every one of us does. Okay. And how do I know that? Well, one, it's obvious. Every single one of us, if offered perfect happiness, would take it. Okay. Second, perfect happiness seems to be something natural to being human because everybody wants to be perfectly happy. And no matter how hard we try, we can't avoid this irresistible urge to be happy. Okay. So all of us want to be perfectly happy. It's natural to us to want to be perfectly happy, but nothing in this world can fulfill it. Okay. Well, a question you have to ask yourself is, where'd this desire to be perfectly happy, where'd it come from? Well, if it's a natural desire, and it is, it's implanted in us, it was put there by God. Now, why would God put a desire in you to be perfectly happy when nothing in this world can satisfy it? Fellas, he did that because he wants you to seek him out. Okay. This is crazy important. God put a desire in us to be perfectly happy, not because he wants us to be frustrated. No, he did it because he wants us to be fulfilled. Because you guys might be sitting there thinking, man, God made me to be perfectly happy, but nothing works. What the heck, God? No, that's supposed to be a lesson to us. God wants us to be perfectly happy. He wants to fulfill that, but he also wants us to learn that nothing in this life can actually do it. Okay? God did not put our desire to be happy in our soul. He did not do that to be annoying. He did it to motivate us to seek him out. Okay. And God intends to fulfill it so long as we cooperate. Well, the fulfillment of that desire, okay, of perfect happiness is the point of our life. Guys, the point of your life is to become perfectly happy, period. Okay. That is the point. And the good news is about all that is that if we are willing to cooperate with God's help to do it, we will achieve it. All right. And this is where I want to leave off this week. Okay. God wants us to be perfectly happy. Now, what we are going to discover in 3 weeks is that he is the only object that can make us perfectly happy. But before we get to that, we need to look at four other non-Christian approaches to happiness. So everybody agrees we want to be happy. If you don't want to be a Christian, then what are your other choices? We're going to look at 4 examples of those over the next 2 weeks, show why they're deficient and why only God can do it. And so I want you guys, as you're living this rule of life, right? You're trying to live this thing out and you're trying to make the best of all this stuff. Keep in mind, fellas, that God, the point of this moral life is to make you happy, and God wants to do that. Okay. So even if the moral life feels burdensome sometimes in the short run, in the long run, it will pay off because it's what's best for us. So I think we'll wrap up there. I hope you guys have a blessed week. I look forward to talking to you guys next time. God bless.